Well, here we are. It is episode number 3 of Let's Get Real Canadian Perspectives on Fundraising. First thing you're going to notice is that Ken Ramsey is not with us this week. We have invited Marla Smith to hang out with us here today. Thank you, Marla. It is so awesome to have this 2-to-1 ratio to Ed.
The old men are in the minority today.
The grumpy old men are now in the right kind of perspective. So,
well, I will do my best to fill in for Ken, but I understand it's very big shoes I'm filling.
well, can I give a little bit of a bio for you, Marla, just to introduce anyone who may not have had the pleasure. So Marla Smith has her CFRE, and she is the Director, Foundation and Communications at Pathstone Foundation. Marla is committed to advance mental health services in the Niagara region of Ontario. She has going on 17 years of experience, leadership experience, and she gives back as a volunteer as well. She's involved on the board of the AFP Foundation for Canada. She is a CFRE ambassador, and she chairs National Philanthropy Day and Education for AFP Golden Horseshoe. Did I miss anything?
Oh my gosh, it's so formal. I'm a mom and a wife and live in the Niagara region. And so, yeah, it's lovely to be here with you guys today.
It is so fun to have you here, Marla. We met just over this past year when you began writing for Hillborn Charity E-News. And you're going to have a really compelling article in the upcoming fall issue of Foundation Magazine, which is what we're going to talk about today. Do you want to just say what the topic of that article is, or should I?
Oh, no, go right ahead.
So we're gonna dive right in and get real about whether our sector is applauding mediocrity too much in fundraising. And I think Marla's experience and her absolute passion and love of what she does really shines through in her approach to this. But it's a good topic, and looking forward to getting into it.
Thanks. And, I think it's interesting, innovation's what sparks our community and the good work that we do. So mediocrity does not coincide with that.
No. And Ed, Marla, right?
Yes. Well, Marla and I met a few years ago through AFP Golden Horseshoe and recently taught the AFP fundamentals together and for the Golden Horseshoe, which was really, really great. Although we did it one of those ways where I spent one full day and Marla spent another full day doing that. So we actually did not teach together in that way, but had lots of interaction getting ready for that course. So, and I know it was a huge success. Tremendous response from a passionate group of people of all different backgrounds in terms of their professional experience in fundraising, which was very unique. First time ever somebody who actually has a CFRE came in to use this as a refresher, just to bring new thoughts, new ideas, new perspective to their own professional practice, which I thought was really great. So I thought it was, so we've known each other and getting to know each other more. And I'm looking forward to this conversation because I know Marla's got lots of things to say. She's not afraid of opinion. And that's what we all are about here at Let's Get Real. Not only practical, honest, and real discussion, but hey, it's okay to say some things that might get people thinking. So I'll leave it to you, Lisa, to move us forward on that.
Okay, but Ed, first, before we do that, just give me a teaser. What are you talking about today? What's your topic?
Well, what I wanted to talk about is, about stats on charitable giving. And I think this may lead to a broader discussion about just generally speaking, how information about the charitable sector is presented by lots of people in various other sectors of Canadian society, and particularly from for-profit and governmental organizations. And I think it's really important. One of the things we're trying to do, let's get real, is find a common knowledge, a baseline. And that's what was so great about the AFP fundamentals. That's what it teaches, this baseline. Here are some basic things you need to know so that you can build from that. And I'd like to get us to talk a little bit about some of these baseline pieces. And let's not allow some of the discussion to be misrepresented or not represented as fully as it can be. So I'm looking forward to having a good discussion about statistics. What do they all mean? And how do we get through the buzz of them all and just do our job and raise money?
Okay, so that's the teaser right there. You and I need to work on like how to like create that teaser and just give it in short form because you nailed it right at the end. And before we go to break,
nobody's ever said that I won't, I actually make a joke about this. If you give me 15 minutes, I'll take half an hour. So that's just me. That's the joy of having me here,
Je ne sais quoi. Okay, I'm going to remember that. Next time I'm doing the intro.
Fair enough.
All right, so here's my teaser before we just start with a quick break. Are people giving to get even? I'll leave that with you. Okay, let's take a quick break and then we'll dive in and I'll tell you a little bit more about what I'm talking about. Okay, so here we are back again. Giving to get even. What am I talking about? Okay, I'm going to back up a step. So earlier this week, Canada Helps launched a new PSA. They had the Canadian actress Kobe Smulders narrate it for them. Very noticeable voice when you hear it if you've watched any of her programs. How I Met Your Mother, for example. And the PSA is about inspiring a movement, hopefully, of generosity. They say themselves that they, Canada Helps, are inspired by the possibility that generosity can build a better world, and they're inviting Canadians to join them in sparking generosity within communities and the country, and that we want to power positive change. So, this is the conversation about generosity and giving. It's not a new one. It resurfaces. It's part of our vernacular. It's part of our language and how we talk about donors and the acts of giving, whether it's volunteer time or resources or even as mentors and things like that. We talk about those being acts of generosity. And I really kind of, when I was thinking about this campaign, when I saw the video, one of my first thoughts were, how is this helpful to frontline fundraisers? Like, what can fundraisers in the sector take from that? How does that become a launch point of conversation? Is it helpful? Is it not? So that is kind of my first question that I'd like us to kind of just talk about a little bit. But secondly, what I also want to put out there is at the same time, I came across a study by an Ivy School PhD candidate who has done some research identifying what he has coined, or the study has coined, as retributive philanthropy. So, and the idea is that rather than generosity, that it's actually this idea of achieving justice and sometimes applying punishment or, referring back, that people are using their philanthropy dollars to kind of take a stand and position themselves. And so then when I started to think about generosity versus this idea of retributive philanthropy, which seems to fly in the face of everything when we talk about charitable giving and philanthropy, I'm like, is this something that may should cause us to rethink donor motivations. Should fundraisers start to think about who their audiences are, and maybe there's a broader approach to taking in terms of some contexts and some types of giving that says there is a niche audience to be talking about out there. So we can get into that a little bit as well, because I'm really interested, Marla, whether this horrifies you, this whole idea, and or whether you think it's kind of compelling and kind of interesting and just putting words around something maybe that's there. So I don't know where you want to start. Do you want to start with the idea of a campaign that's trying to inspire generosity, just in general, a movement, or do you want to talk about it versus retributive philanthropy? Because I've got both.
I think we start at the beginning on donor motivation.
Okay.
And you kind of nailed it when you said, what are donors' motivations for giving? And, I was just thinking back to when Ed and I taught the AFP fundamentals of fundraising, and we really talk about the values that individuals have when choosing to make their gift. And it's always an expression of who they are and what they're looking to move forward. That is often that's often looked at from a positive and generous light. But on the other side of the coin to that, it also can spark almost something that's in spite of. I believe in that children should have access to food, shelter, all these things, but perhaps my neighbor doesn't have that same shared belief. Perhaps they're more interested in supporting the arts or the libraries. And both of them are true, and they're based in our values, and they're motivated by who we are as individuals. The negative connotation really kind of makes us wonder about what those motivations are, and why people want to take almost a retaliatory perspective on them. What do you think,
Well,
Ed?
and sorry, before I
Yeah.
say Ed, one thing that in the kind of précis about the study, or the author does include, and I should probably mention his name. The author is Ethan Milne. He does note that motivations like altruism, self-interest, and even revenge, he says, can coexist
Yep.
in the same donation. So in his research, he's saying, there can be competing or complementary kind of factors that lead to want to make a donation and do that. So I just kind of put that out as from what you said too, Marla.
And to build on that, Lisa, fear is another motivating
Fear.
factor that
Yeah.
many people will have. Fear of war, fear of violence, fear of health. Any of those things are still motivators. And they show up in personalities differently from each person. So if I'm a person that tends to be more positive or more negative, my affiliation and my type of giving will be reflected through my personal behavior and the uniqueness of myself, because that's a value within myself and motivating me in my giving.
Good point. Ed, thoughts?
Well, first, I love that we're talking about donor motivation. I think that's been a notion that's been co-opted. And I think this actually plays a little bit into what Marla wants to talk about in the second segment, which is about, I don't want to call it mediocrity, but some of the basic, almost cliched fundamentals of fundraising. One of the great, I'm going to say this, and this is, I'm channeling both my Ken Ramsey and my Ed Sluga here. One of the chief motivators for donations is alcohol. We have all been to galas. We have all been to golf tournaments. We have all been to various things where the later the night goes, the longer the bar is open, the bigger the total at the end of the day. Okay? We all understand this is one of the things that we don't talk about very openly. And the fact is that we know this. We know this as a sector. And so, the motivation from the donor, and by the way, you can extend that out. That golf foursome has one person perhaps who's really connected to the organization and 3 who are along to play golf for the day. Are they really there to support an organization, or is it the golf course they want to be at, or the chance to get a hole-in-one and win a new car? What is there? A day off of work. Remember, there's a moment where you can say to your boss, I'd like the afternoon off to go and golf. And you can also say, I'd like the afternoon off to go and support a charity. What is your boss going, or the person that you report to, going to say to both of those requests? Of course, supporting the charity as an employer myself, yeah, I'm all for that. What? You want the day off just to go play golf? Forget it. So let's just be, let's get real, to kind of use that expression from the show itself. There are lots of different motivators. And the other thing is, some of them are negative.
Yeah.
The ALS Ice Bucket Challenge was something where we were challenging people to dump cold water and a bucket full of ice on their heads for the day so we can see it. I don't know, guys. I'm not sure that was the generosity and that spirit of community that we all have, or we wouldn't be in this sector, right? But there are a lot of other motivators out there. So I think that's the first thing. I'm not, kind of taking it to another logical, and I just say another. It's not the end. There'll be other things. People give all the time because they're against something as much as because they're for something. That happens all the time. But let's go ahead.
Does something like a generosity campaign, and calling it a movement, is that helpful? Is that a tool? What does that do? What does that make you think, Marla? What do you do with that?
So it's interesting because I watched the PSA, and one of the things that I loved about the PSA is it reflected so much of our diverse population in Canada, including children. And one of the things that really stood out to me about generosity was a little girl who was donating her hair being cut.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, anyone can make a contribution. And those contributions, we typically in the nonprofit world think of in financial contributions, but they're not always that. Sometimes they are the generosity of your hair in order to make wigs for other children or people that need them, that are going through cancer treatment or require for other needs. But generosity can look like many different things. And I love how the PSA encapsulates that generosity also included helping a neighbor carry their chair into their home. So being kind is a form of showing your kindness is in financially supporting an organization, but it's also in the way you show up for each other in our world.
Yeah.
If I can just jump in too around that, and I'm all for moments of national gathering, if I can call it that, or at least national awareness building around generosity. We're doing it in lots of different ways, right? There's, Leave a Legacy from the CAGP, which is still a remnant, still happening across the country. Willpower from the Canadian Association of Gift Planners as well. We've got National Philanthropy Day, Volunteer Week. We've got Make a Will. We've got lots of different things that happen. I think it's really, really important as we see a sort of a decline in what used to be the fundamental place people learned about making contributions, which was going to church, right? We're seeing that go down. So we need someone to step up. I do think there's a moment here, though, and one of the things that is showing up through more and more research is the younger generation. And Marla, this is kind of what you talked about. Acts of kindness are wonderful and they're important. But we also need to have this conversion rate as we're converting people who have this kindness gene that's coming out and expressing itself, and making sure that the contribution that they're making goes beyond, say, liking an Instagram post from a charity to actually donating dollars to that charity. both of them can be seen as support. But as we know, charities need financial support to make their mission real in our communities. So I'm all for them. I think they're great. And I guess coming all the way back around, Lisa, I don't think these two things that you brought up are mutually exclusive. I think they're actually part of this, not to be overly sentimental, but this rich fabric of the way we raise money, right? And what's the next trend? I don't know. But I do think we need to constantly be talking to the community about raising money. And the last thing I'll say is, in that fundamentals course that Marla and I just talked about, I always mention this, and it's a bit of a broad strokes comment, but the reality is that the for-profit sector makes money off of everything they can make money off of. The government sector has priorities, but they change from government to government, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and they're not necessarily in alignment. And then the charitable and not-for-profit sector does everything else.
Yep.
And we need to say that more fully, because we're relied on all of the time. And people don't even know they're relying on a charitable contribution to ensure that services come to them or their family member. I think this is great. The more we can get this out, the better it'll be.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I think what we can do is we can provide links to the PSA,
Sure.
links to the study that was done, so that anyone who's listening to this or watching this on YouTube can access both of these things that we've been talking about, and use that to inform their own discussions and talk to their teams about donor motivation, and just getting real about what, I like how you put that, what the fabric is of our philanthropic sector. And it's not, it's not all, Girl Guide cookies and tulips, sometimes we're talking about different types of giving for different reasons, but it doesn't mean that it all doesn't come to a purpose. So thank you. That was really interesting. I enjoyed that. Let's take another break, and then we're going to come back. And Marla, you're going to talk to us about mediocrity and what that acceptance of that is doing among fundraising teams and organizations of all types, and what you think we can do to help make that a bit better. Sound good?
Can't wait.
All right. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more of Let's Get Real, Canadian Perspectives on Fundraising, right after this. Okay, folks, we are back, and it's Ed Sluka, it's Marla Smith, and I'm Lisa McDonald, and we are talking about Canadian Perspectives on Fundraising. Let's get real, Marla. What's going on in our fundraising shops? What is happening?
It's interesting. I've been toying with the thought process on how essential innovation is in the nonprofit sector, and how the for-profit sector is really able to be, they're often viewed a lot more bold in their activities versus the nonprofit sector being so reserved. And I had spent some time sort of thinking about why that juxtaposition was the way it was. And I started thinking about a meeting where, someone on the team had come, and they had literally just refreshed a document from last year. They put a new title page on it, updated some dates, changed some numbers by 10%, and sent it out. And the manager was like, "That's fantastic." And I was like, "It's not fantastic." And I guess I'm going to stop for a quick sec to say I am all about celebrating people. As you mentioned earlier, I chair National Philanthropy Day, which I take huge pride in because it is celebrating excellence. It's celebrating the importance of the nonprofit sector in our community. It's highlighting achievements that people have taken and often very bold actions and activities that they've done to advance their missions. And then I see these tasks that are really mundane coming across as innovative and excellent. And I said to myself, what's the downside to this?
Mm.
The downside from a high performing employee, from an employee that's sort of just looking to do their everyday work, and then from the sector as a whole. What does this mean for our standard of excellence? And that's the space I was sort of sitting in for quite some time. And so the article itself, which is coming out just this month, is called Stop Applauding Mediocrity. And it's bolder than I normally would have said, but I felt like in order to preserve the nonprofit sector and to be able to really be someone who is looking towards excellence, we need to be lifting up real excellence.
Mhm.
Like, can you think back to a time like Ed, when you've had an example like this and you kind of sit there going, where exactly is the excellence and how are we moving the needle?
Yeah. Well, look, at first, when this was brought up as something to talk about, I was thinking about one particular moment where I was in one of those uh, HR, meetings where they bring all the managers together from across the country, and you're going to be talking about something, whatever it might be, strategic priorities, various things like that, which for most people there is a mundane and difficult day or two of activity. And, this is in the time of cell phones, and most people are on their cell phones trying to manage the teams as we go through what is, just sort of the mundane activity of those events. But this one time it struck me, and we watched the video, very poorly produced, but incredibly illuminating. And this is what it was. It was the whole notion of meets expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes directly to what you're talking about, Marla. And I took this away, and I still use this all of the time. And that is that we're too quick when we judge the activity of those who maybe report to us, and I've had big teams report to me, to say they've exceeded expectations, right? Sometimes we just have expectations, and I know all of us feel we have high expectations. So it's okay for people who report to us to just meet those expectations.
Yes.
For some reason, everything is exemplary. Everything's over the top. Now, I don't want to lose sight of something, which is this. We in this sector, we tend to be overworked and underpaid. There is no doubt about it, right? And we joke sometimes about every job profile that's on Charity Village or, somewhere should be wanted Mother Teresa with an MBA. And the fact of the matter is that we're looking for people to have extraordinary skill and passion and do it all for very little. Okay, so how do we motivate them? Sometimes it's by being overly, open with our praise them too much. But I do think I get your point here. It's okay. It's okay to say, hey, you've met expectations.
Yes.
Well done. But let's not go too far in this. And I do see it all the time too. And if you're looking for examples of this, we can just go on to LinkedIn and see how people praise other people for doing their job. And again, I totally understand where this is coming from. I get it. But I'm hearing you as well, Marla, which is the fact is, there's no further room to go up and really stretch yourself and really get high performers to feel as though they're exemplary and build our new leaders. And that's, I think, ultimately what we're looking for. Who are
You're
the new leaders?
You're absolutely right. We're looking to build new leaders. But I think the other thing that's really important for us to recognize is as leaders, it is our responsibility to show the teams what excellence looks like. We need to be able to set those expectations so people can see themselves in that space and be able to see how excellence looks. We need to give them the creative freedom to be able to do that. One of the things I've learned a lot about AI over these last couple of years is that AI will never replace the creativity that is human, that is us. AI can advance some of the work that we do and speed it, but that creativity is the lifeblood of humans. And because of that, we need to create space for humans to be thinking and creative so that they can achieve true excellence for our nonprofit organizations.
Yeah. I think for me, there's such a tie-in to just leadership in general. And I mean, there's things keep flitting through my mind about, the professionalization of our sector as a whole, and the fact that, um, that idea that, well, we're doing good for people, we're working for charities, and that somehow that supersedes, having to necessarily be excellent and expert in our jobs, um, which is crap. Uh, and I think that it does a disservice to those who are striving to, become better, to advance their skill set. When you start accepting, as you said, Marla, like something that is just, um, okay, fulfilling their mandate, what happens to everybody else who's really trying to step it up and bring in change and bring in growth? And so I think that, leadership and in helping to mentor along their staff through example, through teaching opportunities, through all of that, to me, it's one of the most important aspects, I think, of being a leader. And I think it's one of the premier ways that we can continue to better our sector and have it perform at the level that it needs to perform at.
Couldn't have said it better.
Ed, any other
I was
closing
just gonna
thoughts?
say one other thing about it, which is, and I don't want to lose sight of this, but we do have trends in our sector. And recently, we were in a trend that was all about, and I think, and I don't want to be too grumpy. We joked earlier, and it's fact. I bring the grump. I get that. Okay. But the reality is that we need to praise our folks, but we need to praise them against some measurable. And there was a trend, I think it's kind of going away right now, of kind of removing some measures or removing a way to kind of indicate successes or not. And that leads us to be able to kind of identify true exemplary and extraordinary work and what it meets expectations, which again is very fine. And I think this is a cry out, and I just want to talk, Lisa, about leadership here, because there's a cry out. We'll talk about this at some point in the future, I'm certain of it. But we need leaders, brave, both on boards and in the C-suites of our organizations, to be brave, to understand that we do have this group of people who really care, need to be really well led, not just managed, but really well led. And I think that's going to help us to show that it's okay to do your job well. It's okay. And that allows that space for others to truly succeed beyond expectations. And we can praise them, and it's all a good thing. So anyway, that's my last little statement about that.
Well, and I have to say, in my experience, Marley, you exemplify kind of what that type of leadership is. I've come to understand in a short time how passionate you are for this sector, about what you do, how much you believe in what you do, and yet you are also able to say, and yet we can be better and we can do better. And here's how we can do it. And I think, not to put too fine a point on it, but I think that is the kind of leadership that we are looking for and that organizations are looking for. So, well done you. And
That's very kind. But I've learned from some really great people that have shown me what excellence looks like. And I've been inspired by, what is beyond just, in front of us. If we lived in a perfect world, what would this look like? And how do we continue to grow? And growth mindset, is one of those things that I think is what makes us in nonprofit so special.
yeah. All right. Thank you. So we have one more thing we're going to kind of toss around, the three of us. We're going to take a little break and then we're going to come back and Ed's going to share some thoughts on the numbers, the stats. Thank you for tuning in to Let's Get Real, listening to Canadian Perspectives on Fundraising. Ed Sluga, Marla Smith, and myself, Lisa McDonald. We're tackling very different topics today, but all have been super interesting so far. And Ed, kick us off for this final segment of the show. What are we talking about?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the general perspectives out there that come out of research that's done, that that and that's published into the community. And one of them not so long ago, but again, Marla and I have talking a little bit about the AFP fundamentals we just taught, and somebody came up with some stats, and the stats very bluntly said that the number of Canadians giving to charities is going down year in and year out. And what I said, and I challenged that, was I think 100% of Canadian adults, pretty much 100% of Canadian adults, give to a charity or not-for-profit every year. What they're not doing is utilizing tax receipts or maybe even getting a tax receipt. And when we use one source of information to make a conclusion across the broad spectrum of fundraising, it's not a great thing. So I'm bringing this up because there's a lot of doom and gloom when it comes to fundraising right now. In fact, in that same report, giving itself, dollar figures, is up. Right. So that's an interesting thing, and the only conclusion is that fewer people are giving more money. I'm not sure that that's absolutely the truth, but it's a blunt instrument that's being used. And so we see a lot of these blunt instruments that are going out. One of the things we talk about here, and we'll talk about in the future, is the fact that for a 12, 13, $14 billion a year business, there are not a lot of metrics that we use. Fundraising is really not well defined. It's not well managed in terms of the broader macro perspective. But what information like that, and this trickles down. I had a conversation with someone who's on the board of a private giving foundation at one of the banks, and they said, "What are we going to do about this? Giving is down." And I was like, giving's not down. Everybody gives. Yes, they're not giving $1 million to the local hospital, but they are buying poppies as they're coming out as we head towards November 11th. They're buying apples from Scouts. They're buying Girl Guy cookies. I think we mentioned that earlier. Those are still fundraising activities. Lottery, the Princess Margaret Hospital, well known in Canada as a lottery. I do not get a tax receipt for any of those tickets that I purchase. It's much like the donor motivations. There are many different ways to give to charity, and most Canadians give. And Marla, I think you were talking about younger people giving in the PSA around Canada Helps. Younger people are giving, and they're giving to their local school. Remember, public schools are raising money.
So why does this matter, Ed? Like,
so why does it matter? Because I do think it casts a pall on the work that we do. When we hear from large institutions that fewer donors are out there, what happens is it becomes a bit of a fight over donors, or the perceived fight over donors.
It's that scarcity mindset creeps in, right?
Mindset, and it puts a fear and a panic into the work that we do, rather than a calmness, and rather than a deliberate approach to engaging all those people in various different ways. Hey, if your annual fund program isn't working very well, find another way to engage the mass populace. Maybe sell lottery ticket. It's okay. But I do think what we hear, and this comes from various other agencies, I won't go into them by name right now, but determining that some charities are really working at a high level of efficiency, others are not. Again, where does that come from? Who are these people measuring this? What are their qualifications? I go back to one thing. Years ago, I was working with the faculty of medicine at the University of Toronto, helping to publish their newsletter around health. And they wanted to publish an article from a Norwegian or Danish, it was a Danish study around drinking a glass of red wine a day. So drinking a glass of red wine a day was apparently heart healthy. And I was presented this by the editor, and I said, well, let's just find out who wrote the study or funded it anyway. And a little bit of digging, not a lot. And this is pre-Google days, everyone. Believe it or not, there was a time where it was harder to find information. And what she found very quickly was that Danish study was funded by the French wine industry.
Sure.
Let's just be careful where this is coming from. Everybody is giving out there. It's about us engaging with them. So stats matter, but let's remember where they're coming from. And let's let our eyes sometimes tell us some truths as well. And so that we don't get into this cycle of scarcity or this belief that we are, a couple of years away from being out of business. The charitable sector is strong. It is really necessary. And the work that we're doing is going to be impactful. Absolutely. So for me, that was a really important thing. Let's be real about these numbers. Where are they coming from? What are they trying to tell us? But let's not let's not let those numbers get in the way of the good work that we're doing.
When I think of what you just said, Ed, about scarcity, it reminds me that scarcity breeds competition and fear in individuals. And what that means for our sector is that we are often competing or cannibalizing each other's efforts in order to try to hoard donor dollars for our missions, when that necessarily isn't the case. You said really early on that it might be less people giving, but they're giving more. So the money is still available, and working together is really important. I think the other thing that's really important for people to remember is that when an individual uses a nonprofit organization like mine, which is pediatric mental health, they are often not just using one organization. They may be using many organizations that are supporting them to help them be a giving, caring member of society. And all of those organizations together help support a community, help support a person and a family. And so it's not one organization, it's many organizations working together. And the scarcity mindset prevents us from the true goal that we're hoping to have, which is an impact on a better community.
Yeah. So, and for me, my take on this is that the challenge is, and as someone who works in publishing for the sector and bringing news forward, kind of elevating conversations, whenever you get a piece of quantitative data versus qualitative, which we all kind of talk about all the time, it always feels like, good information that we need to take in, the newest studies, the newest surveys, and there's a lot of bodies out there who are doing these for various reasons. And I think, Ed, like with any media source, it behooves those of us who consume the media to always understand where they're coming from, so that you can get to some underlying kind of truths perhaps behind the findings that are being highlighted and brought forward. But it's like knowledge is power. Quantitative data feels valuable, it feels measurable, and that's something we're always struggling with for our accountability and our transparency. And how do we set our goals? You know, we're looking at donor numbers. We try to put that in a context of what's going on in the larger sector. But then, even then, we know, are we looking at mental health charities? Are we looking at hospitals? Are we looking at children's education programs? And we know that within the sector, the different slices, you know, have different stats, different numbers, different, you know, benchmarks. And there's just it's really difficult to kind of wade through all that and figure out what makes sense to kind of bring forward, what makes sense to kind of merge into your communications with your various stakeholders, what makes sense to bring back to your team and use that to inform your goal making. So it's not a clear cut for me, as kind of a commentator on the sector and trying to, yeah, like communicate out and bring different things forward. When we get into those numbers, it's not an easy thing to sift through and say, well, what is it really telling us? Like, what is the takeaway, you know? But I think it's through conversation, and it's through communication, and it's through, you know, comparative, you know, what's happening over here, what's happening here. And it comes back to leadership. Like, how are we interpreting this data? It's a really important process. And I think it has to be part of a strategic vision. It has to be part of a planning, and it has to be part of that scan outward of what's going on in the sector. So it's like, we can't ignore it, but we have to understand how it's contributing to things like the scarcity mindset. We have to understand what it means to us, you know, individually. So it's a really interesting discussion, I think. And I'm glad that we're starting to have it here, because there's certainly a lot more data kind of coming into our market. But again, from different perspectives for different reasons and different types of conversations. So, you know, lots around AI, lots around use of digital technology, lots of, you know, like very prevalent. And of course, yeah, these giving stats all the time. Everyone's trying to wrap their arms around that all the time. So I think it's going to be an ongoing discussion.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, look at this. My goodness. Do we know how to kill some time? This is not difficult for us. Okay, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to come back after the final break. We're going to give a little bit of our, let's be charitable. What's our good news stories for this week? What do we want to share? We'll be right back with that. All right, here we are back for our final goodbyes and a few takeaways for our Let's Be Charitable segment. These are really some kind of good news things, some nods we want to give, some people we want to acknowledge, organizations. Ed, why don't we start with you?
Well, I wanted to start with one of the things that we kind of touched on in a couple of themes here is that, and I know that there's a lot of hard work being done about building community, right? Lots of communities out there. Let's be charitable. All those people who are spending time to bring people together, from AFPs to CAGPs to AHPs to various other groups, both for-profit and not-for-profit, bringing fundraisers together. There are lots of those groups. I know that we just began something at PG Growth And there is a need for people to gather to talk about the work that we do. So I wanted to just shout out and be charitable. All those people who've been running this. I know Marla has been heavily involved in some of these organizations as well as a volunteer. It's so important to the work that all of the fundraisers out there and others working in not-for-profits, that I just wanted to say, we need to be supporting these groups. It's becoming more and more difficult. We're not getting support from our organizations to be members. So we have to often dip into our own pockets to be members. So, but all of that work being done out there across the country is so valuable. It's harder to find volunteers to do this. So kudos to all of you that are doing it. Yeah, it's a great thing that you're doing for the sector.
Cool. Marla.
Thanks, Ed. And you're right. It is meaningful work, and it makes me think about, November 15th is the day of National Philanthropy Day, which is a day to celebrate the nonprofit sector, but to celebrate excellence, all the good achievements. It's an opportunity for people to take a step back and say, look what's been accomplished in this year. As nonprofit professionals, we often can feel like we are on that proverbial hamster wheel, just churning out work. But if we can't see how far we've come, if we can't see what our success looks like, it is hard to be motivated, and we need to find that. And so celebrating philanthropy, why it matters, the impact it makes in our community, and the people that make that happen is really exciting. And I'm really looking forward to, carving out some space to think about those year-end sort of aha moments and progress that we've had. And sometimes that progress is small, sometimes it's large, and either way, it's steering us in a direction forward. So I think that's something that I really want to take with me.
Amazing. And my shout out is for something a little bit closer to home. You may or may not know that I am based in Ottawa, Ontario now, and I do book editing. I've been editing books for the sector for years and years now, but I just completed a project that was more community-based focused, and it's called, and I want to give a shout out to the book because it is, it's a really amazing kind of look at the impact an individual, to further your point, Marla, can have in philanthropy, in their community, and impacting for future generations. So the book is called Lessons in Philanthropy, and it's the legacy of Barb McInnes. And Barb McInnes here in Ottawa started the Ottawa Community Foundation. And the ripple effect of the work that she did is transcendent. It's continuing on. Barb passed away a couple of years ago. This is a legacy project of love that her husband Glenn has put together, and it has the input of a lot of people who she worked with in Ottawa, in Canada, and in countries around the world that now have community foundations operating thanks to the blueprint that Barbara gave them and inspired. So for those of you who are looking for a little inspiration, please check out Lessons in Philanthropy, and it's a love letter to a person, but it's also a love letter to the sector and the work that's being done, and I think that's never a bad thing. Okay, that's all of our time today. You have been listening to Let's Get Real, Canadian Perspectives on Fundraising. Thank you, Marla Smith, for being our guest. I hope you will come back again. It has been lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much. Happy to join.
Ed, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for representing.
Thank you for bearing with me or putting up with me.
We miss you, Ken. We look forward to having you back next time. Thank you also to our producer, Jody Barron-Sluga. And you can find Let's Get Real wherever you don't download your favorite podcast from. We are also on YouTube. So if you prefer to see our faces as we kind of make our way through this conversation, we are there as well. Until next time. when we get real with some more issues for the charitable sector in Canada. Bye for now.
Bye now.